I have always had a great deal of concern about our current president. I didn't know to what extent that I thought that this was going to become a problem. And now it's really becoming a serious problem because thankfully, a number of senators, including Bernie Sanders, to his credit, who voted no on the endless war spending in both Ukraine and Israel. So the president of the United States decided to say this at a presser just yesterday.
It's important to see the long run here. He's going to keep going. He's made that pretty clear. Putin attacks a NATO ally. If he keeps going, and then he attacks a NATO ally, where we've committed as a NATO member that we defend every inch of NATO territory, then we'll have something that we don't seek and that we don't have today. American troops fighting Russian troops. American troops fighting Russian troops if he moves into other parts of NATO. Make no mistake, today's vote's going to be long remembered, and history's going to judge harshly those who turn their back on freedom's cause.
You know, he may not be completely lucid, but he's lucid enough to tell you that, oh, I'll start World War III if you don't give us some money. Like, that's what did you?
That was nonsense, too. Absolute nonsense. Notice he said other NATO countries. Ukraine's not a NATO country. I'm sorry, Mr. President, they are not. And they never should have been, even in prospect, and they shouldn't be one in the future. The talk he gave, it was in New York. I was in New York. I listened to it on the radio. I just come from giving remarks at a synagogue in New York. And I'm listening to him on the radio, that address from the Oval Office, and I was stunned. Only one person, one commentator got it right at the end. He said, that was a very political speech. That speech was horrible. That speech by Joe Biden essentially said, go back and listen to it carefully. He said, I am going to use the war in Ukraine and the war in Gaza to unify Americans because they're very much apart. What are you saying, Joe? You're saying you're going to use a war that shouldn't even be happening. It should have been stopped. It should be ceased immediately in Ukraine. And a war in Gaza that's even more horrible to unify the American people? Because he prefaced it with remarks about how we're so divided. What was he doing? He was giving a political speech and saying, vote for me. Don't vote for Donald Trump. That's the problem. But I'm going to use these wars and all this death and destruction to solidify you so I can get reelected. I lost Joe at that point. I would never cast another vote for Joe Biden. I've known him for 29 years. I'd never cast another vote for him.
Yeah, we're with you on that.
But
that was despicable.
But it does beg the question, and I know I say this tongue in cheek, and I've been saying it on the show for about 2 years. It's not President Biden, it's President Blinken. I've been very clear about that I believe that he is really the person pulling the strings because it is not Joe, and it is definitely not Vice President
Well, it's not
Harris.
Joe after 6 p.m.
Well, all joking aside, I do think that there is something to be said. You know, you've been in the game a long time. You know, the second term of Reagan's presidency was a very similar circumstance where he wasn't really calling the shots. And we've seen how it wasn't President Bush, but President Cheney, as I like to say. We end up in these very dangerous situations where somebody is it's basically the Wizard of Oz working behind the camera that we can't see. I think this is a very untenable situation here because I don't trust the president of the United States, and I certainly don't trust that he's the person in charge. That's a dangerous place to be in this country, especially right now with what's going on between Russia and China, as far as I can see.
Yeah, I've referred to him as winking, blinking, nod, nudge, nudge being Victoria Nuland. And I think you're right. There are people manipulating Biden, if you will. And they are manipulating the most powerful component in any president's suitcase at this particular time, and that's the prospect of being reelected or not. They've got a great motivation too. There's every prospect that Trump will be back. And if I had to cast a vote for Joe Biden to keep Trump out of the White House and it were that ironclad, I probably would change my mind and cast a vote for Joe Biden. Because that's a scenario I don't want to contemplate. The man is a fascist, pure and simple. He's Mussolini waiting in the wings. And yet he's got a prospect of winning.
Yes, he does. And Joe just keeps, I think the actions of Joe and the Democratic Party have made it easier and easier.
Yeah.
It's like they've done nothing to stop it. It almost feels like they're rolling out the red carpet for Donald Trump in a lot of ways. And what's so interesting to me, and I've been a registered Democrat since forever, basically. I'm 52, so since I was registered to vote. And this is the first time that I'm actively seeing GOP members are the reason that they're going to start shutting down funding or seemingly fighting against giving funding to Ukraine. And none of the Democrats are doing anything about this. Where if there's anything that's going to stop us from supporting Ukraine, go figure, it's going to be the fringe Republicans that are pushing this.
That's not even fringe. It's
no, they are, because they want their border wall. That's what they're, whatever. It doesn't matter who it is.
I'll take a Republican who shuts these wars down. I won't take him for long, but these are just stupid. We have lost our way since 9/11. Majorly lost our way. We cannot. Let's look at Biden's remarks about China, for example. And this is definitely not off subject. His remarks about China are so bellicose that if I were Xi Jinping, I would have changed my entire focus with regard to what the United States might do to me. But let's look at what that means. Our army right now is so tiny, it couldn't fight China in a single province. Our Air Force is 2,000 pilots short. Our Navy is a full complement of surface warships people short. Donald Trump talked about 350 ships. Utter impossibility. We can't get the people. The propensity to serve in the United States is lower than it's been in our history. It's 9%. People do not want to serve. Ask questions, why? And you will find one of the biggest reasons is these stupid wars over the past 20 plus years.
Yep.
We couldn't recruit an army that could fight anybody. We couldn't fight Russia. He talks about defending NATO. Okay, I hope the Germans and the Finns and the Norwegians and the French will be there because we aren't. The most powerful army in NATO right now on its southern flank is Turkey. And it's almost defunct with regard to NATO. Erdogan talks as if he'd like to march on Israel, and sometimes I wish he would. That'd at least, get down about halfway through Lebanon and give them a little fright at least, because the Turkish army is formidable. It would wipe the IDF off the face of the earth. We're losing all of this, and no one's even paying attention, and we are the cause of its breakup.
So, and that brings me to something that I read that you recently put out, which is bringing back the draft. And you think we need to bring back the draft. And I'm not completely opposed to this, but I wanted to hear you explain how that would really work. And what kind of support you think that would get.
Having been in all 50 states in the last 10 years and taught with grandmothers and grandfathers and mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers and exposed to them the fact that women would have to be vulnerable to the draft also. They would be. They'd have to be, because if you didn't, the first man that took a court case would say, hey, they got to come too. And you'd wind up with a court case that would eventually mean that they had to be drafted too.
Yeah.
Here's what the All Volunteer Force Forum, which Major General Dennis Leach and I formed some years ago, here's what we've put together for the Congress, which they will not listen to. They will not even listen to this. Okay, you were some 30,000 or so soldiers and Air Force short. You were some 40% short in the Army Reserves. You're hugely short for the last 2 years. Let's get the camel's nose under the tent. Let's pass legislation that says we will draft, and this is less than probably 70,000 people out of 4.5 million each year. We'll draft the shortfall. We'll draft it in the year of the shortfall for the next year, and then go on with that every time we have a shortfall. That at least gets the American people used to, once again, having conscription. It's a tiny number of people, but look what it would do for the services. It would bring that NFL linebacker into the military. It would bring that son of the president of Princeton into the military. It would bring that potential daughter of the congressman into the military. It would leaven the military, which it's not now, societally, and it would cause the president to have to think not twice or thrice, but maybe multiple more times about using them in a war. The Finns have an interesting draft system. Their draft system works this way. If you're a part of our volunteer force, we can send you overseas, as they did in Libya. If you're not, if you're a conscript, if you're drafted, you can't go anywhere. All you do is defend America, or defend Finland in this case. That's a great idea too. We'd like to see implemented. You know, let's draft people to defend America. Let's make the services what they should be, societally speaking, ethically speaking, not just poor people dying for rich people. That's what it is today. It's poor people being bribed. Sometimes the bonuses now are $100,000 just to sign up initially. They're being bribed to die for rich people. That's unconscionable as far as I'm concerned. If we want to continue to think that we are the indispensable nation, that's just ethically wrong.
Thanks for watching. If you want to support our mission to transform politics into service, please like this video, subscribe, follow us on social media, and consider joining our Patreon, where you'll get early access to our interviews as well as other exclusive content. Links are in the description. Peace out.